At his retirement party in front of 80 people, my dad looked at me and said I wasn't his daughter. Then he pushed me. I hit the floor wearing my mother's dress. No one moved. No one spoke. But what they didn't know was that before this night ended, his entire retirement fund would be frozen, and this time, everyone would be watching him fall. Everything holds up something elsey. That's what my father taught me. I just didn't know. I was the thing he was about to break. Everything looked perfect. That was the first thing I noticed when I stepped into the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers reflected soft golden light across polished floors. White tablecloths, perfectly folded napkins, champagne glasses aligned like they were part of some quiet, expensive ritual. People were smiling, laughing, congratulating my father for 35 years of work. It should have felt like a celebration. Instead, it felt like I had walked into a room where I didn't exist. I paused just inside the entrance, my hand still resting on the strap of my purse, trying to steady something inside me that had already started to slip. My husband, Marcus, stood beside me, calm as always, scanning the room the way he did before every important moment. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. It wasn't true, but I needed it to be. "I just need a minute," I said. He didn't push. He never did. He simply gave my hand a light squeeze, the kind that didn't demand strength but reminded me I had it. I moved toward the seating chart. Rows of names, neatly printed, organized by table numbers. I traced them slowly, scanning left to right, once then again. My name wasn't there for a second. I thought I'd missed it. I checked again. Slower this time. Still nothing. A soft voice came from behind me. "Oh, Heather." I didn't need to turn to know who it was. Victoria. Her tone was warm, carefully measured, like she had practiced it. I turned anyway. She stood there in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, a thin smile resting on her face like it belonged there permanently. "I didn't think you'd actually come," she said. The words were light. The meaning wasn't. The invitation said family. I replied. Her smile didn't change, but something in her eyes flickered. "Of course," she said gently, placing a hand on my arm, guiding me before I could say anything else. "We had to adjust seating last minute. You understand how these events get." I didn't respond. She led me past the main tables, past the center of the room, past the head table where my father sat. And then she stopped. A small table near the back wall. "2 chairs, no name card, no centerpiece, no place? This should be fine," she said. "Fine." I looked toward the front of the room. My father was already seated at the main table, a glass of champagne in his hand, smiling at something Brooke said. Brooke, her hand rested lightly on his arm, like it belonged there, like she belonged there. I sat down. Marcus sat across from me, quiet. Neither of us touched the bread basket between us. From where I sat, I could see everything, the stage, the guests. The man who used to call me his daughter, and the man who hadn't spoken to me in 3 years. Music softened. The room settled. Victoria walked up to the podium. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice smooth, confident. "Tonight, we celebrate an incredible man, a devoted husband, and a wonderful father." Applause filled the room. I didn't clap. Behind her, a screen lit up. Photos began to play. My father at work. My father with colleagues. My father smiling, shaking hands, standing proud. Then the personal photos started. Victoria and him at a vineyard. Brooke and him at a football game. More photos. More memories. Carefully selected. Carefully edited. There wasn't a single picture of me. Not one. Not from childhood. Not from college. Not even my wedding. It was like someone had taken a life and erased me from it completely. I felt something tighten in my chest. Marcus noticed. I saw his hand shift slightly on the table, but he didn't interrupt. He knew this wasn't something he could fix in a moment. Then Victoria smiled wider. "And I want to give special recognition," she continued, "to Richard's daughter, Brooke, his pride and joy." The room clapped again. Brooke stood, giving a small wave, leaning slightly toward my father as he smiled at her. Pride and joy. I stared at that moment longer than I should have. Something inside me made a decision before I could stop it. I stood up. Marcus looked at me. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. I didn't answer. I was already walking, step by step, across the room. Conversations slowed, eyes followed. The distance felt longer than it was. The closer I got to the head table, the quieter everything became. I stopped just beside it. "Dad." He looked up. For a second, just 1 second, I thought I saw recognition. Then it disappeared. "It's been 3 years," I said. "Can we talk?" Victoria leaned in, whispering something into his ear. I couldn't hear it, but I saw what it did. His expression hardened. He stood up, slowly, deliberately. He was still taller than me, still solid. Still the man who used to carry me on his shoulders when I was too tired to walk. Now he looked like a stranger. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I just want to talk." He stepped closer. Close enough that I could feel the shift in the room behind me. "This is not your place anymore," he said. My heart pounded. "I'm your daughter." And that's when it happened. He placed his hands on my shoulders. For a brief, impossible moment, I thought he was going to hug me. Then he pushed. Hard, my heel slipped against the polished floor. The world tilted. And I hit the ground. The impact knocked the air out of me. The sound of fabric tearing was softer than I expected, but I felt it. My mother's dress. Ripped. "This seat," my father said, his voice cutting clean through the silence, "is for my real daughter." No one moved. No one spoke. 80 people. And not a single one stepped forward. I stayed there for a second, on the floor, looking up at him. At the man who taught me how to stand strong, now standing above me like I didn't belong. Behind him, Brooke slid into the chair. My chair. Like she had been waiting. "It's okay, Dad," she said softly, placing her hand on his arm. "She can't hurt you anymore." I pushed myself up slowly. My hands trembled, but I didn't let it show. I picked up my purse, adjusted the torn edge of the dress as best as I could, and turned toward the exit. 1 step. That's all it would have taken. Just 1 step and I could leave everything behind. That's when I heard it. A chair moving. Not mine. Marcus. I turned slightly. He stood up calmly. No rush, no anger. Just control. He buttoned his jacket, adjusted his cuffs, and started walking toward the head table. The room noticed. The silence shifted. Something was about to happen. He stopped beside me, first steadying me with one hand. Then he looked at my father. "Mr. Purcell," he said, his voice calm, almost conversational. "Before we leave, I just have one question." My father frowned. "I told you to take her and go." Marcus didn't react. "When was the last time," he asked, "you personally checked your retirement account?" The question landed heavier than it should have. Confusion flickered across my father's face. Victoria stepped forward quickly. "This isn't the time." Marcus didn't even look at her. "Because before tonight ends," he continued quietly, "something important is about to happen." The room held its breath. And for the first time that night. My father hesitated. Before that night. Before the push. Before the silence of 80 people. Before my father looked at me like I didn't exist. There was a time when I was his whole world. I know that sounds like something people say to soften a story, but it wasn't soft, it was real. My father wasn't an emotional man. He didn't say, "I love you," every day or give long speeches about feelings. That wasn't how he was built. He believed in things that could be measured, things that held weight. Work, responsibility, structure. He spent 35 years in the same manufacturing plant just outside the city, same shift, same routine, same steel, toed boots lined up by the door every morning at 5:30. And somehow, in the middle of all that repetition, he made space for me. When I was 8, he took me to one of his job sites for the first time. It wasn't anything special to anyone else. Just a half-finished structure surrounded by noise and dust, and men shouting instructions over machines. But to him it was something he wanted to share. "Come here," he said, placing a yellow hard hat on my head that was too big, sliding down over my eyes. I laughed, pushing it back up. He pointed toward a steel beam running across the frame. "See that?" he asked. I nodded, even though I didn't understand what I was looking at. "That holds everything up," he said. "You take that out, the whole thing collapses." I remember squinting at it, trying to figure out what made that one piece so important. "It doesn't look special," I said. He smiled. "That's the point." I didn't understand it then. Not really, but I remembered it. Because he said things like that all the time. Simple, quiet, but somehow they stayed. At home, things were smaller but warmer. Our house wasn't big. The paint in the kitchen had started to fade in the corners, and one of the cabinet doors never closed properly unless you pushed it twice. But it was ours. And at the center of it was the table, an old oak table my father built himself the year I was born. 3 chairs, one for him, one for my mom, one for me, no more, no less. He used to say, "That's all we need." My mom would roll her eyes every time he said it. "Until she brings friends over," she'd tease, nodding toward me. "She won't," he'd reply confidently. "She's got us." And back then he was right. My mom was the opposite of him in every way. Where he was steady, she was warm. Where he was quiet, she filled the space. She worked night shifts as a nurse, but somehow still managed to be there when I got home from school. Always with something cooking. Always humming off key like she didn't care who heard. The house smelled like lavender and something baking most evenings. And even when she was tired, she made everything feel held together. Like nothing could fall apart as long as she was there. Then one day it did. I was 11 when she got sick. At first, it was small things, fatigue, headaches, the kind of stuff people brush off because life doesn't slow down for discomfort. But then came the hospital visits. The quiet conversations behind closed doors. The way my father started coming home later, sitting longer at the table without saying anything. And then the word, cancer. I didn't understand everything, but I understood enough. I understood the way the house changed. The way laughter became something that only happened in memories. The way time suddenly felt fragile. She fought for 14 months. 14 months of treatments of hope, of pretending everything would be okay, because saying anything else felt like giving up. And then one morning it was over. My father didn't cry, not in front of me. He stood there, still like something inside him had just shut off. And then he did what he always did. He kept going. He went back to work. He made dinner. He sat at the table same time, same chair. Only now there was an empty seat across from him, and he never moved it. Not once. For 3 years it was just us. No new routines, no changes. Just silence that felt heavier than anything I'd ever known. But even in that silence, there was something solid. We didn't talk about her much. We didn't need to. She was still there. In the way he kept her chair untouched, in the way he never changed the house, in the way he looked at me sometimes like I was the only thing holding him together. And maybe I was. Looking back now. That's what makes everything that came after so hard to understand. Because the man who pushed me to the floor that night was the same man who once carried me on his shoulders so I wouldn't have to walk. The same man who taught me that some things hold everything up, even when you can't see them. The same man who built a life around 3 chairs and believed that was enough. But somewhere between then and that night, something shifted, not all at once. Not in a way you could point to and say, that's where it broke. It was quieter than that. Slower. Like a crack you don't notice. Until the whole structure starts to lean. At that point, I still believed my father would never turn his back on me. I still believed no matter what happened, I had a place at that table. I just didn't know. Someone else was already starting to move my chair. The first time I met her, she didn't feel like a problem. That's important to understand. Because if she had walked into our lives like a villain, loud, controlling, obvious, maybe I would have seen it sooner. Maybe I would have fought harder. Maybe none of this would have happened. But she didn't come in like that. She came in quietly, carefully, like someone who already understood exactly what was missing and how to fill it. My father told me about her over dinner. It was just the 2 of us at the table, same as always, same oak table, same chairs, same silence we had learned to live inside. I met someone, he said, just like that. No build-up, no explanation. I remember looking up from my plate, waiting for something more, something that would tell me how I was supposed to feel about it. She's good, he added after a second. You'll like her. I didn't say anything. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't know where to put that information. For 3 years, it had just been us. Not perfect, not easy, but ours, and suddenly there was going to be someone else sitting at that table. Someone who didn't know how things used to be. Someone who didn't understand what had been lost. Her name was Victoria. She came over the following weekend. I remember the way she stood at the door before stepping inside, like she was measuring the space, reading it. She was dressed simply, but everything about her felt deliberate. Not flashy, just controlled. "Hi, Heather," she said, smiling gently as if we already knew each other. "I've heard a lot about you." That was the first thing that felt strange. Because my father didn't talk much. Not about me, not about anything personal. And yet she said it like it was true. Like she already had a version of me in her mind. Dinner that night was easy. Easier than I expected. She asked questions, but not too many. Listened more than she spoke. Complimented the house without sounding like she was judging it. Even laughed at one of my dad's quiet, dry jokes, the kind that usually went unnoticed. And for the first time in a long time, I saw something in my father's face I hadn't seen since my mom died. Relief. That was the moment she won. Not with me, with him. Over the next few weeks, she became a regular presence. At first, it was small. Dinner once or twice a week. Then weekends. Then suddenly she was just there. Like she had always been part of the routine. She never pushed. That's what made it work. She didn't try to replace anything directly. She just adjusted things. Quietly it started with the house. One afternoon, I came home from school and found her in the kitchen reorganizing the cabinets. Nothing major, just small changes. Moving things to more practical places. "I hope you don't mind," she said when she saw me watching. "It just makes more sense this way." I nodded. It wasn't worth arguing over. It was just a cabinet. A few days later it was the living room. The photos on the wall had been rearranged. Not removed. Just shifted. My mom's picture was still there, just not in the center anymore. Victoria had placed a new frame beside it. A picture of her and my father at some event I hadn't been part of. It looked balanced, intentional, like it belonged. And that's how she did it. She didn't take things away. She made them feel replaceable. By the time my father told me they were getting married, it didn't feel sudden. It felt like something that had already happened, and we were just catching up to it. "It'll be small," he said. "Nothing complicated." And it was. A simple ceremony. A few people. No big celebration. Victoria wore ivory. I wore the only formal dress I had, a one my mom had bought me years before. No one said anything about that. But I noticed the difference anyway. After the wedding things changed faster. Not dramatically. Not in ways you could easily point out. But enough. The oak table was the first thing to go. Victoria framed it as an upgrade. "Something more modern," she said, running her hand across the polished marble surface that replaced it. My father agreed. The old table was moved to the garage. I remember standing there later that night looking at it. 3 chairs. Still intact, just not part of the house anymore. Then came the routines. Dinner times shifted. The way the house sounded changed. More conversations, more noise. But somehow less of the kind that included me. Victoria had a daughter. Brooke. She was 2 years younger than me at first. She only visited occasionally. Then more often. Then she moved in, and just like that the house that had once felt full with 3 people started to feel crowded, but not in a way that made room for me. Brooke adapted quickly. She called my father Dad within weeks. At first, it sounded strange. Out of place, but no one corrected her, not even him, especially not him. I remember one night in particular. We were all sitting at the new dining table. Victoria was talking about something, I don't even remember what. Brooke was laughing, and my father, he was smiling at her. The same way he used to smile at me, proud, soft, present. I sat there quietly watching it happen. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to stop it, without sounding like I was trying to take something away. And maybe a part of me didn't want to fight it. Because if I did, it would mean admitting that something had already been taken from me. Looking back now, that was the mistake. Not speaking, not questioning, not protecting what mattered. Because while I was trying to be understanding, while I was telling myself that families change, that people move forward, Victoria was doing something else entirely. She wasn't adding to our life. She was rewriting it slowly, carefully, completely. At that point, nothing felt broken. Not fully, but something didn't feel solid anymore. Like the ground beneath everything we had built was starting to shift. And I still believed, if I just stayed quiet, if I just adjusted, if I didn't make it harder, things would settle. I didn't realize that silence doesn't fix anything. It just gives someone else more space to change the story. At first I didn't hear it. That's how it works. If someone shouts, you notice. If someone argues, you respond. If someone attacks you directly, you defend yourself. But whispers don't feel like danger. They feel like background noise. It didn't start with accusations. It started with concern. Small, careful comments, placed just the right moment. I didn't hear most of them directly. I saw their effect. The first time I noticed something was off wasn't during a fight. It was during something much quieter: dinner. Victoria had made something new. A different kind of meal than we were used to. More polished. More intentional. She placed the plates down with a soft smile, then sat beside my father. Brooke was talking about school. I said something about a project I was working on. It wasn't important. Just a normal conversation. Until my father responded. "That's not really practical," he said. I blinked. "What?" "The project," he repeated. "It's not something that's going to help you long term." His tone wasn't harsh. But it wasn't him. Not the him I knew. He had always encouraged me, even when he didn't fully understand what I was doing. "Since when?" I asked carefully. Victoria didn't look at me. She looked at him. Just for a second. Then back to her plate. He hesitated. "It's just something to think about," he said. And that was it. Conversation moved on. No argument, no explanation, just a small shift. That was the first whisper. After that, things started happening more often. Not big things. Nothing you could point to and say, "This is where it changed." Just moments, patterns, tiny adjustments in the way my father spoke to me. He started questioning things he never questioned before. Where I was going. Who I was spending time with. What I was planning for the future. Not aggressively, just consistently. At first, I thought it was normal. Parents worry. That's what they do. But this felt different. It didn't feel like concern. It felt like doubt. One night I walked into the living room and heard my name. I wasn't trying to listen. I just paused. "I'm just saying." Victoria's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "She's been distant lately." There was a pause. "She's always been independent," my father replied. "She is," Victoria agreed quickly. "And that's a good thing. I just worry that sometimes independence can turn into detachment, silence." Then, "I don't think she means to," she added gently. "But after everything, people cope differently." I stood there, just out of sight. My chest tightened. I hadn't done anything. Not really. But suddenly it sounded like I had. That was the second whisper. She never said anything directly to me. That was the part that made it hard to fight. If she had accused me openly, I could have responded, defended myself, cleared things up. But she didn't. She spoke to him, and only him, and slowly. His perspective started to shift. He began to misremember things. Or maybe he remembered them the way she framed them. "You didn't call me last week," he said once. I stared at him. "I did." "No, you didn't." "I did, Dad. Tuesday night." He frowned slightly. Victoria was standing in the kitchen, quiet. Listening. "I'm sure," I said. He didn't argue. But something in his expression stayed uncertain. Like he wasn't convinced. Later that night I checked my call log. 3 calls. All unanswered. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not fully. But enough. Because it wasn't just that he didn't remember. It was that he believed a version of events where I wasn't there. And that version was becoming stronger than the truth. The whispers got sharper after that, still soft, still controlled, but more specific. "She seems distracted. She doesn't spend much time at home. She's always busy when you need her." None of it was entirely false. That's what made it work. It was just framed, carefully. Reality wasn't changed. It was adjusted. One evening I came home later than usual. Work had taken longer than expected. When I walked in, my father was sitting at the table. Waiting, that wasn't unusual, but the way he looked at me was. "You didn't tell me you'd be late," he said. "I texted you." I didn't get anything. I insisted. Victoria stepped into the room. "Oh," she said softly, almost apologetically. "I think I saw that message." Both of us looked at her. "It came through while he was in the shower," she explained. "I must have forgotten to mention it." She smiled slightly, like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Because my father didn't question it. He didn't ask why she had his phone. He didn't ask why the message never reached him. He just accepted it, and in that moment, something clicked. This wasn't random. This wasn't miscommunication. This was control, not loud, not obvious, but consistent. Access, information, timing. She wasn't changing what I did. She was changing what he saw, and once I realized that, everything else started to make sense. The missed calls. The forgotten messages. The way conversations always seemed slightly off. It wasn't that my father stopped trusting me overnight. It was that, little by little, he was given reasons not to. And I was never in the room when those reasons were planted. That was the real power of it. Because how do you defend yourself against something you can't hear? Looking back now, I can see it clearly. The pattern, the structure, the way it was built. But at the time, it just felt like I was slowly losing something I couldn't hold on to. And the worst part, I didn't fight it. Not the way I should have. I told myself it wasn't serious, that it would pass, that my father would see through it. I believed the foundation was strong enough to hold. I was wrong. Because by the time I realized what was really happening, the whispers had already done their job, and my father was no longer hearing me. At first, I thought it was temporary. That whatever had shifted between us, whatever distance had quietly built itself inside our home, would settle on its own. People go through phases. That's what I told myself. Misunderstandings happen. They pass. You give it time, space, and eventually things find their way back. That's what I believed. The first call I made after everything started to feel wrong went to voicemail. I didn't think much of it. My dad worked long hours. Sometimes he didn't hear his phone, so I left a message. "Hey, it's me. Just wanted to check in. Call me when you can." Simple, normal. Nothing emotional. Nothing that could be misunderstood. He didn't call back. The second time, I tried again the next day. Same result. Voicemail. This time, I hesitated before speaking. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because something in my chest felt different. Like I was reaching for something that had already started pulling away. "Hey, Dad, just making sure you're okay. Call me back." I hung up. Stared at my phone for a few seconds longer than I needed to. Then I put it down. Still nothing. By the end of that week, I had called 4 times. Not obsessively. Not back to back. Just enough to feel like I was trying without pushing too hard. That's when I sent the first text. "Hey. Haven't heard from you. Everything okay?" It showed delivered, no reply. I told myself he was busy. That work was overwhelming. That maybe he just needed space. So I gave it to him. A week passed. Then 2. Then a month. The silence didn't break, it settled. And slowly, what felt temporary started to feel permanent. I adjusted. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what else to do. I started calling less. Once a week instead of every few days. Then once every 2 weeks. But I never stopped. Every call followed the same pattern. Dial. Speak. Hope. "Hey, Dad, just checking in. Hope everything's good. Call me when you can." Each message sounded calmer than I felt. More controlled. More distant. Like I was trying to make it easier for him to come back. He never did. After 3 months, I decided to stop guessing. I drove to the house. It was the first time I had gone back since everything started to shift. I stood outside for a moment looking at it. Nothing had changed. Same walls, same windows, same place that used to feel like home. I knocked. Victoria opened the door. She didn't look surprised. That was the first thing that told me something wasn't right. "He's not here," she said before I even spoke. Her voice was calm. Polite, practiced. "When will he be back?" I asked. "I'm not sure," she replied. Work has been very demanding lately. I nodded slowly. I've been calling. I know, she said. That made me pause. You know, she smiled slightly. He's just needed some space, Heather. You understand how overwhelming things have been. I stared at her, trying to read something beneath the surface. There was nothing, just calm. Controlled calm. I just want to talk to him, I said. And you will, she replied gently. Just, not right now. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't give me anything to push against. And somehow, that made it harder to fight. I left. I told myself I would try again later, that this wasn't the end. Just a pause. But the pause stretched. 6 months. By then I wasn't just confused. I was starting to feel something else. Doubt. Not about him. About myself. Had I done something wrong? Said something I didn't realize? Missed something important? Because when someone disappears from your life without explanation, your mind starts filling in the blanks. And it rarely fills them kindly. I tried a different approach. I called his office. The receptionist answered, friendly, professional. I asked to speak with him. There was a pause. Then, I'm sorry, he's not available right now. I can wait. Another pause. Longer this time. He's actually in a meeting for the rest of the day. Can you tell him I called? Of course. He never called back. I tried again the next week. Same answer. Different wording. Same result. At some point, it stopped feeling like coincidence and started feeling like a system. A pattern that didn't leave room for me. But even then, I didn't stop. Because stopping would have meant accepting something I wasn't ready to accept. So I kept calling. Birthdays, holidays, random Tuesdays. I left messages that became shorter over time. Less hopeful. More neutral. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're doing well. Call me when you can. I stopped asking questions. Stopped expecting answers. But I didn't stop reaching out. Not even on Christmas. That year. I couldn't make it home. Work had me tied to a project I couldn't leave. So I called him on Christmas Eve. Voicemail. I left a message anyway. Hey, Dad, I'm sorry I can't make it this year. I love you, Merry Christmas. Then I sent a text, Merry Christmas, I love you. Delivered. No reply. That was the moment something inside me changed. Not completely. Not enough to walk away. But enough to understand. This wasn't just distance anymore. This was chosen, maintained, protected, and the hardest part. I still didn't know why. After a while, I stopped expecting him to answer. But I never stopped calling. Because somewhere inside me, there was still a part that believed. If I just kept reaching out, one day, he might reach back. I didn't know then that every call I made was disappearing before it ever reached him. The invitation didn't come from him. That was the first thing that felt wrong. It wasn't a message, not a call, not even a forwarded email from someone who still knew me. It came from a corporate address. Subject line, retirement celebration, Richard Purcell. I stared at it longer than I should have. My father's name. Formal. Detached. Like he was someone I used to know, not someone I had spent years trying to reach. I opened it slowly. Details filled the screen. Location, time, dress code, black tie optional, a country club I'd only ever heard about, never visited, and one line that stayed with me longer than the rest. We invite family and close friends to join us in celebrating his legacy. Family. The word sat there quiet, heavy. I read the email again, then again. As if something might change if I looked at it differently. It didn't. Marcus found me like that. Standing in the kitchen, phone in my hand and not moving. You okay? He asked. I handed him the phone without saying anything. He read it. Didn't react immediately. That was his way. He didn't jump to conclusions. He let things settle before deciding what they meant. They sent this to you? He asked. Yeah. From him. No. That was enough for him to understand. He looked back at the screen. Then at me. You're thinking about going, he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I didn't know what I was thinking. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Close the email. Pretend it didn't matter. Like the last 3 years hadn't already proven, but I didn't belong in his life anymore. But another part of me, the part that had kept calling, kept hoping, kept waiting for something to break the silence. Saw it differently. This wasn't just an invitation. It was an opening. A room full of people. A moment where he couldn't walk away, where he couldn't ignore me. "He hasn't spoken to me in 3 years," I said quietly. Marcus nodded. "I know, and now I'm supposed to just show up." "You're not supposed to do anything," he replied. "The question is, do you want to?" That was harder to answer. Because wanting to go meant wanting something from him. And I had spent 3 years trying to convince myself I didn't need that anymore. "I don't want to be humiliated," I said. The words came out softer than I expected, more honest. Marcus leaned against the counter. "You won't be," he said calmly. I almost laughed. "You can't guarantee that." "No," he agreed. "But I can guarantee this. If you don't go, you'll keep wondering what would have happened if you did." That landed. Because he was right. The silence had been unbearable, but was worse. I looked back at the email, at the time, at the place, at the version of my father that existed somewhere inside that event. "This might be the only chance," Marcus added. "To what?" "To see him, without someone controlling the room." I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer immediately. Just looked at me for a moment. "Measuring something." "Nothing," he said after a second. "Just think about it." That was the thing about Marcus. He never pushed. But he always knew more than he said. I should have asked, pressed him, tried to understand what he meant. But I didn't. Because I was already thinking about something else. What I would wear. It sounds small, unimportant. But it wasn't. Because if I was going to walk into that room, after 3 years of silence, after everything that had changed, I needed to carry something with me that hadn't. I opened the closet, moved past clothes I barely remembered buying, past things that belonged to a version of me that had learned to move on, or at least pretend to, and then I saw it. The navy blue dress. My mother's. I hadn't worn it in years, not because I didn't want to, but because it felt too much, too close to something I wasn't ready to revisit. I ran my fingers over the fabric, soft, familiar, still holding a memory I couldn't fully explain. She had worn it once, to an anniversary dinner. Back when everything was still intact. I held it up, looked at it for a long moment. "If I go," I said slowly, turning back toward Marcus, "I'm wearing this." He looked at the dress, then at me and nodded. "Then you're not going alone," he said. "I know." That wasn't what he meant. And for the first time since the invitation arrived, I felt something shift, not hope. Not exactly. Something quieter. More controlled. Like I wasn't just reacting anymore. Like I was preparing. The night of the event came faster than I expected. The drive there was silent. Not uncomfortable, just focused. The closer we got, the more real it became. The building came into view slowly. Lights stretching across the entrance. Cars lined up. People moving in and out like this was just another celebration. Marcus pulled into the drive. Stopped the car. For a moment neither of us moved. "You still have time to change your mind," he said. I looked ahead. At the doors. At the place where everything was about to happen. "I've already waited 3 years," I said quietly. "I'm not waiting anymore." I stepped out of the car. The cool air hit my skin. The dress settled around me like it remembered how it was supposed to feel. And as I walked toward the entrance, I realized something. I didn't know what was going to happen inside. I didn't know what he would say, or if he would say anything at all. But I knew this. This wasn't just his night anymore. The moment I stepped inside it, I knew. This wasn't going to be neutral. The room was louder than I remembered. Laughter bounced off the walls. Glasses clinked. Conversations overlapped in that polished, controlled way people speak when everything is supposed to feel important. It should have felt like a celebration. But now that I was inside it, it felt staged. I walked beside Marcus, aware of every step, every glance. People noticed. Not in a loud way, but in that quiet shift of attention, the kind you feel before you see. Some of them recognized me, I could tell. A pause in conversation. A second glance that lingered too long, like they were trying to place me inside a story they thought they already understood. We reached the seating chart, same as before, names printed neatly, organized, perfect. I didn't rush this time, I took my time, let my eyes move slowly. Row by row, still not there. My name didn't exist here either. I let out a small breath. Not surprised. Not anymore. Back table, Marcus said quietly. I followed his gaze. A small table near the edge of the room. 2 chairs, no label. I almost smiled. Almost. Consistent, I said under my breath. We walked toward it without another word. Sat down. From there, I had a perfect view of the head table. My father sat in the center, exactly where he was supposed to be. Straight posture, clean suit. That same presence he carried everywhere, the one that made people respect him before he even spoke. And beside him, Brooke. She leaned slightly toward him, her hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. Like she had always belonged there. He said something to her, she laughed. And he smiled, not polite, not forced. Real. I watched that moment longer than I should have. Because it wasn't just that he was happy, it was that he was happy. Without me. Marcus didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. He could feel it. The lights dimmed slightly. The room began to settle. Victoria stepped up to the podium. She looked exactly how she always did. Controlled, confident, like everything around her was moving exactly the way she planned it. "Good evening, everyone," she began. Her voice carried easily across the room. Warm, measured, perfect. "We're here tonight to celebrate an incredible man." She turned slightly, gesturing toward my father. "A man who has given 35 years of his life to his work, to his family, to everything that matters." Applause. I didn't move. Behind her, the screen lit up. The slideshow started. Images of his life, his career. Moments frozen in time that were meant to tell a story. And they did. Just not the whole story. Victoria and him at events I had never been invited to. Brooke and him in places I had never been. Smiling, laughing, living. Frame after frame. And not once did I appear. Not as a child. Not as a daughter. Not as anything. It wasn't an accident. It was a decision. Something in my chest tightened. Not sharply. Not suddenly. Slowly. Like something being pulled, stretched, tested. And I want to give special recognition. Victoria's voice cut through my thoughts. She smiled toward the table. To Richard's daughter, Brooke, his pride and joy. Applause filled the room again. Brooke stood, smiled, gave a small wave. And my father looked at her like she was exactly that. Pride, joy. I felt Marcus's hand move slightly on the table. Not grabbing mine. Just there. Grounding. That was the moment. The one where I could have stayed seated, looked away, let the night pass. But I didn't. I stood up. The chair made a soft sound against the floor. Not loud, but enough. Marcus looked at me, not stopping me, just asking one silent question. "Are you sure?" I didn't answer. I was already walking. The distance felt longer this time. Every step echoed, not in sound, in awareness. People noticed, they always do. Heads turned. I kept walking, toward the table. Toward him. I stopped just beside the empty chair. "Dad." He looked up. And for a moment, I saw something flicker. Recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by something harder. Colder. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Not loud but clear. "I just want to talk," I replied. Victoria leaned toward him. Whispered something, I couldn't hear it. But I saw it. The way his expression changed. The way his shoulders tightened. That was the moment he chose. He stood up, slow, controlled. "This is not your place anymore," he said. My heart pounded. But my voice didn't. "I'm your daughter." Silence. He stepped closer. And then, his hands were on my shoulders. For a second, just 1 second, I thought, maybe this was the moment everything would stop. Maybe he would pull me in. Maybe this was the break in everything that had been building for years. Then he pushed. Hard. My heel slipped. The floor rushed up faster than I could react. Impact sharp. Real. The sound of fabric tearing followed a second later. Soft, but final. My mother's dress. His seat. My father said, his voice cutting clean through the silence. "Is for my real daughter." No one moved. Not one person. 80 people. And I was alone on the floor. I looked up at him, not angry, not crying. Just looking. Trying to understand how the same man who once held everything together could stand there and act like I had never been part of it. Behind him, Brooke slid into the chair, my chair, like it had always been hers. "It's okay, Dad," she said softly. "She can't hurt you anymore." I pushed myself up slowly, every movement controlled. Not because I wasn't shaking, but because I refused to show it. I picked up my purse, adjusted the torn edge of the dress as best as I could, and turned toward the exit. One step. That's all it would have taken. Just one step, and I could have left everything behind. Then I heard it, a chair moving. Not mine, Marcus. I didn't turn fully, just enough to see him, standing, calm, not reacting, not rushing, preparing. And in that moment, for the first time that night, the balance shifted, not in the room. Not yet. But something was about to change. And this time, it wasn't going to be quiet. For a few seconds, nothing changed. The room was still the same. Same lights, same people, same quiet conversations trying to restart after what had just happened. I stood there, just a few steps away from the exit, my hand still wrapped around my purse, my breath steady, but not calm. Behind me, Marcus moved, not fast, not dramatic, deliberate. That was the first thing people noticed. He didn't rush to defend me. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't react the way people expected. He walked straight toward the head table. And somehow, that was louder than anything he could have said. Conversations didn't stop all at once. They faded, one by one, like something invisible was passing through the room, asking everyone to pay attention. I turned slowly. My father was still standing, Victoria beside him. Brooke seated, her hand still resting lightly where mine had been moments ago. Marcus stopped a few feet away from them, close enough to be heard, not close enough to be emotional. "Mr. Purcell," he said. His voice was calm, even, controlled in a way that didn't ask for attention, but got it anyway. "I think it would be a good idea," he continued, "if you checked your phone." A pause. "This isn't the time," he replied. Marcus didn't move, didn't argue, didn't raise his tone. "I understand," he said. "Which is exactly why I'm asking now." Something in the way he said it shifted the air. Not threatening, not aggressive. Certain. Victoria stepped forward slightly. "This is inappropriate," she said, her voice still smooth but tighter now. "You need to leave." Only for a second, then back at my father. "Sir," he said quietly, "when was the last time you personally reviewed your retirement accounts?" The question landed wrong. You could feel it, not because of what it was, but because of where it was asked. In a room full of people. At a moment that was supposed to be controlled. My father's expression hardened. He said, "No." Marcus agreed easily. It wasn't. A small shift. Until it became one. Silence. Not the kind from before. Not the kind that follows embarrassment. This was different. This was attention. Victoria's posture changed slightly. Barely noticeable, but I saw it. Her hand moved. Not much. Just enough to rest against the edge of the table, grounding herself. "You're making a scene," she said more firmly now. "This is a private event." Marcus didn't react. Instead, he reached into his jacket. Not quickly. Slow enough for everyone to follow the movement. Every eye in the room was on him now. Every conversation had stopped. Even the background music felt quieter. He pulled out his phone, unlocked it, looked at the screen for a second, then lifted his gaze back to my father. "You should check," he repeated, "because what's happening right now isn't something you're going to want to hear from me." That line changed everything. My father hesitated. For the first time that night, he didn't have an immediate response. Victoria noticed it. Of course she did. "Richard," she said quickly, her voice lower now, more urgent, "this is ridiculous. We can handle whatever this is later." Later. That word hung in the air. Marcus shook his head slightly. "There isn't going to be a later," he said, still calm, still controlled. "But there is a now." A ripple moved through the room. People shifted in their seats, leaning forward, trying to understand what they were watching. Because this wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was becoming something else. Something bigger. My father reached for his phone, slowly. Like he didn't want to, like some part of him already knew. Whatever was there wasn't going to be simple. Victoria's hand moved again. This time toward him. You don't need to do this, she said quietly. He didn't look at her. That was the moment she lost control, small, almost invisible, but real. Because for the first time, he didn't follow her lead. He looked at his phone. The screen lit up. I couldn't see it from where I stood. And that was enough. Confusion first, then something else, something sharper. His jaw tightened. "What is this?" he said. Not to Marcus. To himself, Marcus didn't answer, not yet. He let the moment stretch. Let the silence grow heavier. Because now, everyone was watching. Not me. Not the fall. Him. The man who had controlled the room. Now looking at something he didn't understand. "What is this?" he repeated. Victoria stepped closer. "Richard, give me the phone," she said quickly. He didn't. He kept staring at it, scrolling, reading. And the control he had built around himself started to slip. Marcus took one step forward. Just one. "Now," he said quietly. "You're starting to see it." The room held its breath. No one moved, no one spoke. Because whatever was happening, it wasn't over. It was just beginning, and for the first time that night, my father wasn't the one in control anymore. For a moment, no one understood what they were looking at. My father stood there, his phone still in his hand, his eyes fixed on the screen like it had just said something impossible. "What is this?" he asked again, this time louder, not controlled, not calm. The room didn't answer him, because the room didn't know. But Marcus did, and he didn't rush to explain. He let the silence sit. Let it grow. Let every second stretch just enough to make the moment heavier. "Richard," Marcus said finally, his tone steady. "What you're looking at is a temporary hold." "A hold on what?" My father snapped. "On your retirement accounts." The words landed like something solid. Heavy, final. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone near the back whispered something under their breath. "That's not possible," my father said immediately, but his voice didn't sound certain, it sounded defensive. "Check the sender," Marcus said. My father's thumb moved across the screen, scrolling, reading. Trying to make sense of something that wasn't fitting into the version of reality he understood. "It's from the bank," he muttered. "Not just the bank," Marcus corrected. "There's also a compliance notice attached." Victoria stepped forward quickly. "Give me the phone," she said. This time there was no softness in her voice. My father hesitated, then handed it to her. That was the first real mistake she made, because the moment she looked at the screen, her expression changed. Not slowly, not subtly, instantly. Her eyes moved faster, her breathing shifted, her control slipped. "This is a mistake," she said quickly, too quickly. "It happens all the time," she added, forcing a small laugh. "System errors. We'll fix it in the morning." Marcus shook his head. "No," he said calmly. "This isn't a system error." The room tightened again. Victoria looked at him sharply. "You don't know what you're talking about?" "I do," he replied. He stepped closer, not aggressive, just certain. "Because the hold wasn't triggered randomly," he continued. "It was triggered by an internal review." My father looked between them, confusion turning into something else. "What review?" he asked. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Victoria. And for the first time that night, she didn't look back. "That depends," Marcus said slowly. "On how much you already know." Silence, heavy. Uncomfortable, my father turned toward her. "Victoria," he said. She shook her head quickly. "I told you, this is nothing." "Then why does it say unauthorized transfers?" Marcus interrupted. The words cut clean through the room. Unauthorized transfers. Now people weren't just watching, they were listening. My father's face changed. "What?" he said, his voice lower now. Victoria didn't answer. She couldn't. Because the moment had already moved past her control. Marcus continued. "There have been multiple movements of funds over the last 18 months, he said. Small enough not to raise immediate concern, but consistent enough to trigger a pattern. My father took a step back. "That's not possible," he said again, but this time, it sounded like he was trying to convince himself. "It is," Marcus replied. "And tonight the system finally flagged it." Victoria stepped forward again. "This is ridiculous," she said sharply. You're making accusations in front of people who have no business hearing this. Marcus didn't raise his voice. I'm not making accusations, he said. He nodded toward the phone still in her hand. I'm describing what's already been documented. That line hit harder than anything else. Because it wasn't emotional. It wasn't dramatic, it was factual, and facts don't disappear when you ignore them. My father reached for the phone again. This time, she didn't stop him. He took it, read, scrolled, read again, and with every second, the certainty, the control, the authority he had carried all night, started to break. Why is your name on this? He asked suddenly. The question wasn't directed at Marcus, it was directed at her. Victoria froze, only for a second, but it was enough. It's just paperwork, she said quickly, because I manage some of the accounts. Without telling me, he cut in. That was the moment everything collapsed, not loudly, not all at once, but completely, because now, the room understood, not every detail, not every number, but enough. Enough to see the shift, enough to see who had been in control, and who wasn't anymore. Brooke stood up. Mom, she said, her voice uncertain now. Victoria didn't answer. She couldn't. Because for the first time, she didn't have a version of the story that worked. My father looked at her, really looked, and whatever he saw, it wasn't what he expected. I trusted you, he said, simple, quiet, but heavier than anything else in the room. Marcus stepped back slightly, not claiming the moment, not pushing it further, because he didn't need to. The damage was already done, the hold, the transfers, the questions, all of it was enough. Around us, people began to shift again, not talking. Not yet, just processing, because what had started as a celebration had become something else entirely, and in the center of it, my father stood, holding a phone that had just rewritten everything he thought was true. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Because this wasn't about proving anything anymore. This was about him, finally seeing it. And this time, there was no one left to whisper in his ear. For a while, no one moved. The room was still full, still lit, still dressed like a celebration. But whatever this night had started as, was gone. My father stood in the center of it. Phone still in his hand, eyes no longer searching. Just fixed. Victoria had stepped back, not far, but far enough, like distance alone could undo what had just been seen. Brooke stood beside her. Confused, uncertain, looking between them like she was waiting for someone to explain what reality she was supposed to believe now. No one spoke. Not yet. Because there are moments when words don't fix anything, they just make it louder. My father finally looked up. Not at the room, not at Victoria, at me. And for the first time that night, there was no anger in his face, no control, no certainty, just something broken. Heather. My name sounded unfamiliar coming from him, like he hadn't said it in a long time. I didn't move. I didn't know, he said, simple, direct. But not enough. Because those 3 words didn't cover 3 years, they didn't cover the calls, the silence, the distance. The moment I stood outside his house and was told to leave, and they didn't cover what had just happened. The push. The words. The way he had looked at me like I didn't belong. I didn't know, he repeated. I nodded slightly. I believe you, I said. The room shifted. Not because of what I said, but because of how I said it, calm, even, not forgiving, not angry, just true. His expression changed. Relief tried to surface, but I didn't let it. That doesn't change what you did, I continued. The relief disappeared, and something heavier took its place. I tried to reach you, I said. My voice stayed steady. For 3 years I called, I showed up, I waited. Every word landed quietly. I wasn't hiding, I added. You just stopped looking. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty, it was understood. My father lowered his gaze, not in shame, in realization, because for the first time, there was nothing left to argue with. No version of events to adjust. No whisper to follow. Just the truth. Behind Victoria tried to step forward. Richard. This is being blown out of proportion. Stop. His voice cut through hers, not loud, but final. She froze. Because this time, he wasn't listening. He looked back at me. I thought, he started, then stopped. Whatever he thought, it didn't matter anymore, because it wasn't real. I should have checked, he said instead. I didn't respond, because this wasn't about what he should have done. It was about what he didn't. Marcus stepped slightly closer beside me, not taking over the moment, just there, steady, the way he had been the entire night. My father said suddenly, that word, fix. It hung in the air like it meant something. Like everything that had happened could be undone with the right action. I shook my head. No, I said softly. He looked at me, confused. This isn't something you fix, I continued. It's something you face. The difference mattered. Because fixing something implies it goes back to how it was, and we both knew. It couldn't. Not after this. Not after everything. He swallowed slowly. What do you want me to do? He asked. It was an honest question, maybe the first one he had asked me in years. And for a second, just a second, I thought about all the things I could say, all the things I had wanted to say, but none of them felt right, because this moment wasn't about revenge. That had already happened, not because I planned it, but because the truth had finally reached him. I don't need anything from you, I said. Maybe even me. I just needed you to see it. And now he had. The room felt different again. Not tense. Not broken. Just settled. Like something that had been hanging in the air for years, had finally landed. I took a step back. Not away. Just enough to create space, the kind of space that had been missing for a long time. I hope you figure it out, I said. Not cold. Not warm. Just honest. Then I turned. This time, when I walked toward the exit, I didn't hesitate, no pause, no second thoughts. Because I wasn't leaving something unfinished, I was leaving something complete. Marcus walked beside me, not saying anything. He didn't need to. The doors opened. Cool air met us again, and for the first time that night, it felt different, lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Behind us, the room would keep moving. Questions, consequences, things that would take time to unfold. But none of that belonged to me now. As we reached the car, I looked down at the dress. The tear was still there, visible, real. But it didn't feel like damage anymore. It felt like proof. Of what had happened. Of what had been seen. Of what could no longer be denied. I opened the door, paused for just a moment, and I let it go.